When I first started painting, I chose acrylics as my medium of choice. I love painting in big, bold electric colors. I guess you could say, a modern-day fauvist, an artist who paints expressively with vivid, neon-like, unnatural colors. My inspiration to paint like that came from artist John Nieto. Sadly, I learned he passed away at the age of 81 not too long ago. So as I was reflecting on his work and looking at some of his images on the internet, I decided I was going to return to my roots as a beginning painter back in the day when I loved to paint in those big, bold electric colors, and I would create a new contemporary painting inspired by Nieto's style. Now, this story begins way back in the early 1990s when I was hired by musician Patrick O'Hearn to provide art direction for his brand new independent record label called Deep Cave Records. O'Hearn had been a bass player for Frank Zappa. He later became a founding member of the 1980s band called Missing Persons, and then he released a number of solo works on the private music label. However, O'Hearn decided to become an independent artist and strike out on his own. So that's where I came in. He invited me to create the album art for his first release as an independent artist. And I really took that assignment in earnest. I spent hours researching the type of imagery that would go along with this fantastic collection of new music from Patrick O'Hearn. Early on, I discovered the artwork of John Nieto as I was scouring through art magazines and graphic design magazines. I came across John Nieto. His style was incredible. I loved it. It was very bold. His use of intense electric colors and expressive brush strokes were just the thing that I felt would match O'Hearn's music, and it would be a great eye magnet for a CD cover sitting in a record bin back in the day when that was a thing. But you would notice it. You could see it, and it would fit the mood of the album. Unfortunately, as it would work out, I ended up ruling out licensing Nieto's work, and it wasn't because it wasn't good enough. It was fantastic. I loved his artwork. Rather, I ended up using artwork that more closely aligned with the Deep Cave branding. So I ended up licensing an ancient image of an artist that had created his artwork thousands of years ago on a cave wall where he spray painted his hand, an image of his hand, on a cave called Kosker Cave, located, I believe, somewhere in France. It worked out great. It went on to be a Grammy-nominated album, and we won an award for Best Album Cover Design back in 1995. I had always wanted to use Nieto's work on a music album, but I never got the opportunity to do so. John Nieto, who is one half Mescalero Apache, was born in 1936 in Denver, Colorado. He grew up in New Mexico and went on to study fine art at the Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas during the late 1950s. Upon returning to the United States, Nieto began depicting animals and people of the Southwest in radiant colors, and that would be his trademark look and style for the next several decades. Though I discovered Nieto's works way back in the early 1990s, it was not until a couple of years ago that I finally saw his works in person. And this was at the Booth Western Art Museum located in Cartersville, Georgia. There I saw two large works by Nieto. They were on display in their fabulous Modern West gallery. The first painting I saw is titled Geronimo Apache. It was done in 1995. Now, this particular painting is done in oil. The second Nieto painting I saw at the booth is called Apache Scout. It was completed in 2008. Now, this one is in acrylic on canvas. For this painting, I pulled out all my old tubes of acrylic paints, which includes Golden, Liquitex, and other assorted brands. For my subject, I chose a bigger-than-life character that made an impression on us as teenagers, Billy Jack. I know. Please bear with me. This is my tongue-in-cheek ode to 1970s teenage angst. I sketched a likeness of Billy Jack on a 30 by 40 inch stretched canvas. I used a charcoal stick to quickly make the sketch. Now, I find figurative work extremely challenging. I'm not very good at it. I'm learning. I rarely do it, so I need to do it more to get better at it. And of course, the only way to learn is to do. Now, this sketch is pretty much like any other figurative sketch. You can recognize the likeness of Billy Jack here. However, when you take into consideration what I'm about to do, and that's to paint in the style of John Nieto, the question is, how do you take Nieto's fauvist approach to painting figures and create a likeness using all these non-naturalistic colors and still retain a recognizable likeness? It's not as easy as it looks. I was about to find out just how difficult this is. Of course, there is one big problem using charcoal stick to sketch out your drawing on a canvas. It's very loose and it will smear and it'll come up into the paint as you start to apply paint. So what I did is I used a matte medium to cover over the charcoal lines, and then I also intentionally used it to smear the charcoal into a sort of grisaille underpainting. In other words, a grayscale underpainting. Now, once the matte medium dried, I wouldn't have to worry about the charcoal drawing bleeding into the other colors that I would later apply. Next, I began to work on the background color. First, I start off with the magenta color. My intent is to allow this magenta color to show through the next layer of paint as a broken color. This is a style that you will see often in John Nieto's backgrounds. You'll see that background color break through another color. So what I do here is the magenta is applied first. It dries within 10 to 15 minutes, and then I apply various shades of blue over that. Now, after laying in the background, I begin to block in the black of Billy Jack's hat, as well as the deep shadows of his clothing. And I do this in a very exaggerated way. This is something you will see in Nieto's work. He uses bold outlines of both black as well as electric colors to outline his subjects. Now, in this case, I'll come back later to add a few bold lines of color. I begin blocking in more details on the face. Now, this is where it really gets hard for me. As I mentioned before, Nieto's work looks deceptively easy to pull off. However, think about this. How do you model a subject's face using all these bright, non-natural colors? The way Nieto does it is astounding. Now here I'm struggling to make it work. I'm going over and over again Billy Jack's face, and I'm beginning to lose the correct proportions of his eyes, nose, and mouth. Oh my, it's hard, but I keep adjusting, and I keep persisting. I bravely press on. I'm going to finish this painting one way or the other, no matter how it turns out. Now next, after finishing the face, I work on the shirt and the rifle. And here I'm relieved to work on something that's a good bit easier to do. I add finishing touches to the shirt by adding bright orange red outlines as well as a few highlights. The band on the hat is painted, and I add a bit of separation of the hat from the background by lightening the background on the right side of the hat a little bit. And finally, my painting in the style of John Nieto is completed. So a couple of lessons from this. One, it's not as easy as it looks to work in this fauvist style. John Nieto is a very accomplished painter. He evidently was very prolific during his career as a painter, and I've only done a handful of these, so it's going to take a lot more in this style to really master it. One thing I learned pretty quick was I got very confused with where my sense of where the light source is in the painting. And as you can tell, if you look at it closely, you can see that it's a bit off. Most people won't notice, and it's kind of a cartoonish type painting, if you will, so it's not a huge deal. But you, my fellow artists, you probably will notice it. So the next time I do one of these things, I will give that better attention. Well, all that remains to do is for me to sign this painting and eventually varnish it. Oh yeah, and I've got to come up with a title for it. So what do you think I should call this painting? I know, I'm going to call this one 110 Soldier. So will I continue painting in acrylics? I imagine from time to time I'll experiment with them. I'll keep working at it. I had a lot of fun doing this painting, so I may do a few more like that. Now, I'm not giving up oil painting or landscape painting. I still want to master that. I think it's important to master that. I think if I master realist painting, I can take all of those principles that I learned there and then start to experiment with these bold paintings. Of course, I'll show you what I do right here on my channel. Be sure to subscribe, click the bell notification button so you don't miss any future episodes of The Artful Painter. Leave a comment below and let me know, do you paint in acrylics? What do you think of acrylics? Now it's your turn. Go out there and paint something amazing.